Sloane didn't kiss me goodbye, not even a half-hearted pat on the shoulder or that fake smile she reserves for polite company in our elite social circles. Just wheeled her designer suitcase to the door, phone in one hand, sunglasses already on indoors, and said, "Don't wait up." I said, "Are you sure the client meetings need 4 days?" That's when she paused, not to think. No, that would require respect, but to smirk. That theatrical chiseled smirk she uses when she thinks she's winning. "Stop being so emotional about my work trip, Vance. I'm not your property," she said, like she was reading from some TikTok influencer's playbook on gaslighting your high net worth husband. I didn't argue. I didn't even flinch, just replied. Noted. She left. That's the exact second something broke, but not in the way she expected. No yelling, no breakdown, no pathetic begging or pacing the floor like some sitcom husband. I just stood there, stared at the closed door, and let the silence stretch until the only thing I could hear was the humming of the fridge and the faint echo of her heels in the hallway. Then I turned and walked straight to the study. There's a leather-bound folder on the second shelf behind a row of old books she never bothered to read. She used to call it my weird retirement stash. It's labeled in silver foil contingency. I opened it, pulled out a page marked Phase 1 Containment, dialed the number of Julian Hayes, my high-stakes divorce attorney, a man I hadn't touched in 4 years. Begin protocol. She's in motion, I said. That was all. No drama, just strategy. Within 3 hours, 3 NDAs had been signed by men whose names she wouldn't recognize and whose silence cost more than her entire marketing budget last quarter. If anyone in our high society circle is listening to this and you're not paying attention yet, now might be a good time to do it. The silence genuinely helps men like me keep consequences like this coming. Her flight landed in Phoenix at 6:32 p.m. The client she claimed to be meeting was out of town until Tuesday. I didn't call her. I didn't ask for photos. I already knew. The joint investment portal password changed, subtle but insulting. Our credit card alert pinged. The Phoenician, not the chain the client booked. This one's a sleek luxury resort. Dinner for 2, champagne, a $23 tiramisu, room service. I didn't confront her. I updated the access keys to my holding firm and signed over power of attorney to a man who owed me his career. He sent the confirmation doc back within an hour with a single sentence at the bottom. About time. That night, I sat by the window and watched her social media slowly fall silent. No check-ins, no story updates, no selfies from the sleek rooftop lounge of the Halcyon where I already knew she was sitting with him. When she hides, she thinks she's being clever. I texted someone I hadn't contacted since college. His reply came fast. 1 sentence confirmed, he's with her. And then I sent just 4 words to a second contact, someone she has met, but never bothered to learn the last name of. She's in. Move forward. By the next morning, her department head had been offered a private contract. The man didn't hesitate. That job she kept bragging about. It's already been quietly moved under a different division. This isn't about catching her in the act. That's amateur hour. I don't need to see him in her bed. I've already got him in my forensic financial audit, a mid-level executive, 2 promotions in 5 years, and 1 very suspicious travel record that intersects hers like clockwork. She thinks she's playing with emotions, that if she just spins the story right, she can make me look like the jealous husband who couldn't handle a powerful woman in our high society charade. Let her, because she has no idea what she just stepped out of and even less of a clue about what she's walking back into. She didn't call that night. Not a landed safe. Not a fake long day. I'll text later. Not even her usual guilt offering. A blurry photo of her overpriced hotel dinner with a passive-aggressive caption like, "Client dinners never end." Just silence, which would have almost been believable if her location hadn't pinged from a boutique hotel 2 hours south of the actual client's office in Scottsdale. I watched the little blue dot settle in for the night on a street I recognized, right past the local artisanal espresso bar, Crema and Bloom, where we used to have our so-called date nights before the marriage became a high society photo op. Romantic, discreet. I closed the tracker, not because I couldn't stomach it, but because I didn't need confirmation. I already had the receipts. Joint credit card charged at 8:46 p.m. for dinner at the Monarch. 2 entree filet mignon, champagne, dessert, room service at 11:13 p.m. Then nothing except for a little push notification that made me smile. Attempted login failed. Our investment dashboard. She tried logging into the portal we use for our family trust. I changed the password that morning. She always assumes I move slower than I do. Let her learn. I reopened the contingency folder, flipped to the second tab, Asset Isolation. My signature was already there from a week ago. All it needed was activation. By 10 p.m., the holding firm's legal counsel received limited power of attorney transfer instructions. They didn't ask questions, just filed, executed, confirmed. She thinks she's hurting me, like I'm pacing in the kitchen, drinking myself sick, waiting for her to come home and lie to my face. Instead, I was reviewing a tax document dated March 3rd. An innocuous signature line she scribbled past without reading, one that linked her voting rights to her fidelity and adherence to our ironclad prenuptial agreement loopholes. I wonder what the audit committee will think of that clause. But we're not there yet, not officially. For now, it was time to let shadows do their work. I sent a message to Silas. He's not a lawyer or a cop or a hired gun. Silas is a systems man. He used to work for a bank until we hired him to intercept data and build the fail-safes for our shared network. The guy you bring in when your cyber asset value outweighs your liquidity. I texted him 4 words. She's in, let's move. His reply was a photo, a USB drive on top of a folder labeled Project Ember. She never even knew it existed. See, 3 years ago, I started quietly developing a forensic financial sandbox inside the company. Patents, code, research, the high-value stuff, the crown jewels. She mocked it as my little tech bunker, said it was outdated, paranoid. Now it was my leverage, packed with her downloaded iCloud backups. By midnight, a draft memo had been prepared for the board, not sent, just scheduled, dated 2 days from now. Title: Temporary Restructuring During Leadership Review. She still thought she had time, that if she just kept her story clean and her tone confident, she could gaslight me into silence, play the victim when the cracks showed, maybe even cry in the kitchen one night and say, I didn't mean for it to happen. We were just lonely. Too late. Loneliness didn't change the password. Loneliness didn't fake a location. Loneliness doesn't check in under a different name. And her lover, oh, we'll get to him. I already know who he is. Not just his name, his role, his vulnerabilities. He's not her partner. He's her liability. She may have walked out thinking she was the storm, but she forgot. Some of us build the weather. The manila envelope hit my lap with a soft thud in the freezing, gritty downtown Denver parking garage off Colfax, where Victor, my ruthless private investigator, handed over the payload. Photos are expected, blurry silhouettes through hotel curtains, matching time-stamped receipts, maybe a hand on her back at the valet, all standard PI fare. But what Victor laid on top of the photos, that was the real payload. A name. Preston Blake, 34, mid-level operations manager at my company, not even in a separate division. He works 2 floors down from my office, attended 3 of our strategic planning sessions, once asked me for advice on an MBA program. We shook hands. I told him to stay ambitious. She met him at a team-building retreat 6 months ago, one I skipped because I was in the middle of renegotiating our supplier contracts. Funny, I remember her coming home unusually upbeat that weekend, claiming the trust falls finally made her team feel like family. Apparently, she took the trust part quite literally. I flipped through the report. Dinner in Aspen, a weekend booked under corporate reimbursement for a mentorship seminar. One photo showed her laughing in a robe by the patio of a resort suite. He's shirtless, holding 2 mimosas. I'd seen enough. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was strategic. Preston works under her father's oversight, not in name, but in influence. Her father sits on the advisory board, has for years. Officially, he's retired, but unofficially, he's the shadow that shaped our hiring decisions, partnerships, even which damn pens we stocked in conference rooms. So I started digging, not into Preston. I already had what I needed, but into the timeline. I pulled up my archive, emails, meeting invites, HR memos. I searched for Preston's name, then narrowed it by month. Hired July 7th, 2 weeks after her father's golf trip to Cherry Hills, right near where that resort photo was taken. I searched again, this time filtering for BCC fields and forwarded messages, found a handful of internal updates. She'd looped someone off record, masked but not well. One was routed through her personal email. Guess whose IP address the login originated from? Her father's ranch. So let's get this straight. She meets Preston, her father meets Preston, Preston gets fast-tracked into the company, then she pulls Preston into a retreat, bills it as mentorship, and books them a shared suite under a team budget code. This wasn't infidelity, it was infiltration. And that shifted something in me. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was calculating because once betrayal goes corporate, it becomes chess, and I've been playing longer than all of them combined. That night, I opened the secure drive where I store compliance drafts. There was an old report from a former ethics officer flagging Preston for excessive proximity to a previous female supervisor. It had been dismissed quietly by HR on her father's recommendation. I reopened the case file. Then I called my general counsel, Julian Hayes, not the public one, the private one, the one who's never appeared on our org chart. "We've got a breach," I said. He didn't ask what kind, just said, "Do you want isolation or exposure?" "Both," I replied. "We scheduled a meeting for Thursday. Preston doesn't know it yet, but his badge will stop working by Friday. As for her father, well, he's about to learn what happens when the man he underestimated builds escape hatches into every corner of the empire. They thought I'd panic, that I'd fold. But the one mistake you never make in business or in a high-stakes marriage is trying to steal from the man who built the vault. There's a door on the 27th floor she's never walked through. Technically, it's marked as a storage annex, outdated blueprints, archive contracts, old furniture we were supposed to donate and never did. She once joked that it was where ambition goes to die. She never bothered to ask why it had biometric access. I placed my thumb on the scanner. The door clicked open, and the silence inside was cathedral-like. No dust, no clutter, just a long walnut table. Matte finished. No centerpiece, no windows. This wasn't for appearances. This room was built for decisions. 3 men were already seated, each with a black folder in front of them. Legal, financial, security, not department heads. Those are just figureheads. These were the ones I hired off Ledger, the ones whose compensation isn't in our books, but in my offshore vaults. I sat down and placed a single envelope on the table. "This is the trigger," I said. Legal opened it first. Inside, an updated copy of my will dated 5 months ago, notarized, quietly filed. It established the Caldwell Continuity Trust, an irrevocable entity with full proxy control over my shares. He nodded, slid the document to the financial rep. Inside his folder was the blind trust registration. Already funded, active, the signature, mine, the timing filed 2 weeks after her team-building retreat with Preston. He raised an eyebrow. "You've been planning this a while." I smiled. "I plan everything. I just hoped I wouldn't have to use it." Finally, security opened his file. A new access protocol starting Thursday. All internal floor movement would require retinal scan and 2-factor token access. Specific employees, her included, would trigger a passive alert when entering restricted levels. He added quietly, "The new chair has already been onboarded, and that was the part I've been waiting for. She always assumed I'd sit in that chair until I died, that even if we divorced, she'd inherit the company by osmosis, that the company I built was just one big sentimental scrapbook with the cash flow. She never once considered I might have installed a successor years ago. The new trustee is a man she's never met, Marcus Thorne. He doesn't appear on our website, doesn't attend board meetings, but he's been shadowing me for 3 years. Call him what you want. Executive, successor, ghost director. To her, he's a stranger. To me, he's the lock I designed long before she ever found the key. I tap the table. From here on out, I am a symbolic figure. The trust votes in my place. Legally, I'm a consultant." Legal nodded again. "And she doesn't know." "No, and when she finds out, it'll be too late to challenge." Security added, "She's going to notice the changes. She can notice whatever she wants," I said. "Noticing isn't the same as stopping." The mood in the room didn't shift. These men aren't emotional. They've handled estates after assassinations, reverse mergers in hostile zones, asset seizures during high-asset divorces that make mine look like a schoolyard breakup. But even they knew this was surgical. I didn't need her permission. I needed her overconfidence. She was too busy sipping room service champagne with Preston to realize that her title had become ceremonial, that her influence was now PR deep. I stood up and buttoned my jacket. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Let her walk back into the office thinking nothing's changed. Because that's the most effective kind of power. The kind that doesn't shout. It waits. And when it moves like architecture. Deliberate, unstoppable, permanent. I watched it all unfold through the hidden nanny cams. Sloane arrived Wednesday evening, dragging her suitcase behind her like a trophy. Still in heels, makeup untouched, smelled like expensive hotel soap and someone else's cologne. The key clicked in the lock, but there was no scent of dinner, no music playing, no husband sitting with his laptop at the kitchen island like usual, just silence. She dropped the suitcase with a dramatic sigh. Waited, called out Vance, once light, casual, performative, no answer. Checked the bedroom. Empty. Walked into the study, my study, and found the chair pushed in, files cleared, laptop missing. She stood there for a moment, chewing the inside of her cheek, then scoffed, probably off sulking somewhere. She figured she'd give me a day to pout, then smooth it over with some half-truth about team dinners and how I'm always so suspicious lately. She went to sleep in the guest room. The next morning, she wore her usual CEO's wife outfit to the office. Tailored cream blouse, hair up, pearl earrings, power by association. She breezed past the front desk with a nod, didn't bother flashing her ID, then stopped short. Two unfamiliar guards stood in front of the executive elevator. Not rent-a-cops, real ones, ex-military types. Sharp suits, earpieces, expressionless. She blinked. "I'm heading up," she said, reaching for the button. One guard raised a hand. "New security protocol, ma'am." She laughed once, dry and incredulous. "I'm the CEO's wife." They didn't respond. She looked at the panel. No light, no floor indicator. The elevator didn't move. She pulled out her phone and dialed her father. Voicemail, texted, "Why are there guards blocking the exec elevator?" 30 seconds later, her father appeared around the corner, walking fast, sweating slightly. "Dad, what the hell is going on? Why can't I get upstairs?" He didn't answer, just took her elbow like she was a child acting out in public and muttered, "There's something you need to see." She wrenched her arm away. "Tell me what's happening." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Just come upstairs." Now the elevator beeped. The guard stepped aside for him. She hesitated, then followed. As they ascended, she noticed her key card clipped to her bag wasn't scanned, only his. Something was off, she could feel it now. Not a scream, not a panic, but that low internal static that hums when a system begins to reject you. When they reached the 27th floor, the doors opened to a lobby that looked altered, new carpet, new artwork. Even the receptionist's desk was gone. Her father tried to usher her forward. "Wait," she snapped. "Where is everyone? Where's my husband?" He didn't answer. Just opened the door to the boardroom and stepped aside. She walked in and froze, not because of who she saw, but because of who she didn't. I wasn't there, but two other men were. One of them, middle-aged, silver hair, sharp eyes, stood when she entered. He didn't smile, didn't offer his name, just gestured to the seat across from him. She looked at her father. "What is this?" He avoided her eyes. The man said calmly, "There's been a temporary restructuring. Your husband has taken leave. I've been appointed acting trustee of his seat." "Trustee," she repeated the word, foreign in her mouth. "Yes," he said, "as outlined in the Caldwell Continuity Trust filed 6 months ago. Approved last quarter." She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. "This is ridiculous. He can't just disappear and appoint some stranger to—" "You're not on the board." The man interrupted gently. "Your father's not on the board. Neither's Mr. Blake." She blinked. "Mr. Blake?" "Preston," he clarified. "Your junior associate. He's under review by the ethics committee. Effective immediately." She turned to her father again, but his face was blank. She didn't know it yet. Not fully, but the air had shifted. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a cold shoulder or a silent treatment. This was structure, movement, deliberate redirection. And for the first time, her footing slipped. Not enough to fall, but enough to realize the floor beneath her wasn't hers anymore. The boardroom smelled like fresh leather and controlled air, not a speck of dust, not a folder out of place. And yet, the temperature felt off, as if the HVAC was whispering that something irreversible had changed. She stepped inside and stopped cold. Her father stood stiffly by the glass wall, arms crossed, face flushed but silent. Preston, her lover, her little secret-turned partner in crime, was seated awkwardly near the end of the table, his jacket off, tie loosened, color gone from his face. They both looked at her, then immediately looked away. Her stomach tightened, and then her eyes landed on the man in my chair. Mid-60s, silver hair perfectly parted, charcoal gray suit tailored like armor, cufflinks that glinted like they came with classified clearance. He was calm, unbothered, reading from a file with surgical detachment. Her voice snapped before she could even think. "Where's my husband?" The man didn't look up immediately. He finished reading, closed the folder with precision, then met her gaze not with aggression, but with the kind of quiet dominance that doesn't need to prove itself. "Not here," he said. "I'm acting trustee of the Caldwell Holdings seat." She blinked. "Trustee." The man offered a small, almost amused smile. "That's correct? Your husband executed a blind trust directive in April. I was appointed trustee of record. This transition has been active for 36 days. She looked at Preston. Nothing, just that same pale, guilty stillness. She turned to her father. Dad, what the hell is going on? Her father looked like he'd aged 10 years. He opened his mouth, closed it again. The man continued casually. Your father's advisory position was removed in the May realignment. You would have received notice had your permissions been active. She turned back to him. My permissions are active. I'm on the board. My name's on every document. No, the man said simply, setting the folder down. Your administrative access was provisional. Your voting rights were tied to fidelity and adherence to our ironclad prenuptial agreement. Both were voided as of last week. It hit her like ice water down the spine. Void. Voided. By who? The man didn't blink. By you. Indirectly. Your actions triggered Article 12 of the Ethics Clause in the Charter. You co-signed it during refinancing last fiscal year. Clause 12C, conflict of interest, cohabitation with subordinate staff, and a direct violation of the prenuptial fidelity clause. Preston stirred. Then his throat made a faint sound like he wanted to speak, but then thought better of it. She wasn't finished. I want to speak to Vance now. The man nodded politely. He left instructions. You're welcome to observe this meeting. You are not authorized to speak during official votes or be present for closed deliberations. This is my company, she hissed. The man turned a page in the folder. No, it was his. Now it's the trust's, and I represent it. She moved a step forward. Reflex. Instinct. Delusion. The man didn't raise his voice, didn't stand. Just said without looking up, security is instructed not to intervene unless you attempt to breach restricted access zones. I'd advise against it. Her father sat down heavily in the nearest chair, rubbing his temple. Preston wouldn't meet her eyes, and she, still in her power heels, still in her fitted silk blouse, still trying to hold the room by habit, realized she had walked into something that had been unfolding long before she ever zipped her suitcase. The game was not just rigged, it had already ended. She just hadn't received the final scorecard until now. Her father finally broke the silence, his voice strained and brittle. This has gotten out of hand. We need to speak privately. But the man at the head of the table, Marcus Thorne, older, lean, the kind of executive who once brokered mergers in countries without names, held up a hand. No need, he said calmly. Everything's already been reviewed and filed. He slid a folder across the smooth walnut table, not aggressively, just firmly, like a verdict. It stopped right in front of her. She hesitated, then opened it. The first page, voting record analysis, internal stakeholder shifts. The second, compliance memo, HR anomalies, and suspicious delegation chains. The third, a photo. It was her and Preston at the sleek rooftop lounge of the Halcyon. She was laughing. He was touching her wrist. Time-stamped below it, a short memo from internal risk relationship confirmed via forensic financial audit of shared accounts, device geolocation, downloaded iCloud backups, and unreported overnight lodging claims, violation of executive conduct protocols, Articles 7A and 7C. Preston made a choking sound. She looked at him hard. Did you know they were watching us? He didn't answer. His face had gone chalk white. One of his hands twitched beneath the table. The trustee, calm as ever, spoke without raising his tone. Your husband recused himself from the investigation 2 weeks ago. The ethics review was triggered automatically when Article 7 was violated. Given the timeline, no one on this board has the authority to override that. She blinked. You mean I'm being investigated formally? As of this morning, the chairman said, and I'm being suspended. The trustee nodded once, pending the full results. During this period, your office access will be revoked. Your company credentials will remain inactive. You may submit a formal statement for review. Counsel is permitted. She turned slowly to her father. Her voice, once laced with steel, cracked. Dad. He didn't move, didn't speak, just rubbed the bridge of his nose and stared at the tabletop. Dad, say something, she hissed. Finally, he looked up, and in that one glance, tired, resigned, 1,000-yard corporate stare, she saw what she didn't want to believe. He knew. Not everything, but enough. He had known Preston's name, knew the whispers, knew the conflicts, and he had chosen silence until it was no longer an option. Because now it wasn't about family. It was about exposure. He wasn't here as her father. He was here to protect his legacy, what little remained of it. She looked around the room and saw what had changed. These men, these suits, these chess masters, once my allies, then hers, by extension, were no longer offering her nods or smiles or polite fictions. They looked at her like an acquisition gone toxic, something you quarantine before it infects the rest of the system. Preston tried to mumble something. An apology, maybe, but she cut him off with a glare. Too late. She was alone, not in the room. There were bodies everywhere, but alone in the worst possible way. The system she thought she understood, the one she believed bent to charm, to pressure, to her last name, had turned to granite beneath her feet. No amount of pleading, positioning, or posturing would change it, because this wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about liability. And when systems protect themselves, they do it without mercy. She stormed out of the boardroom before anyone officially dismissed her. She didn't wait for protocol, didn't sign the ethics notice, didn't make eye contact. Her heels echoed like gunshots across the marble floor, her jaw locked so tight it ached. Her father didn't follow, neither did Preston. Back in her office, technically still hers for another 12 hours. She slammed the door, locked it, and yanked her phone from her purse. HR didn't answer. PR forwarded her to voicemail. Legal sent an auto response. Please direct all ethics-related inquiries to the Compliance Liaison Office. She threw the phone onto her desk. It bounced once, landed screen up, buzzing. New notification, Inbox 1, Leadership Transition, and Organizational Integrity. The subject line alone made her breath hitch. She opened it. An official communication from the Caldwell Holdings Shareholder Relations Office. Polished header, embedded company seal, and then the photo. It hit her like a slap. Me, smiling faintly, arms crossed in that signature quiet confidence pose, standing next to the new acting chair. The caption read, "Founder's Vision Sustained. Transition built on legacy." Her eyes darted down the page. A message followed, crafted in perfect PR speak. Effective immediately, the Caldwell Continuity Trust has executed a leadership realignment in accordance with Article 9 of the Founders Agreement. This change, aligned with best governance practices, ensures organizational stability, ethical leadership, and long-term asset protection. It was clean, legal, unapologetic. But the kicker, the timestamp, scheduled send, Saturday 9:04 a.m. 3 days ago, before her return, before her elevator humiliation, before the boardroom folder, before any of it. She scrolled to the bottom, hoping, praying for some sign that this was reactive, some last-minute scramble to contain chaos. But instead, she saw email tracking data. Delivered to all shareholder recipients, 4 p.m., opened by 92% within 30 minutes. Top engagement location, Executive Investor Suite, level 28. They had already celebrated. She wasn't even an afterthought. Just a final delivery on a campaign long in motion. Her hands started shaking, not out of sadness, not even out of shame, but from the brutal realization that she'd been playing checkers in a room full of chess masters, and the game had ended before she'd even stepped onto the board. She yanked her laptop from its dock, opened Slack, her team channel archived, her executive comms group deleted, her permissions revoked. She tried to access her server drive. Denied. Tried her personal cloud backup. Blocked. She stared at the screen, blinking, then noticed something in the upper right-hand corner of the email window. Sent to all shareholders at Caldwell Trust. Sent last. Delivered 4:03 p.m. Her name was at the bottom of the recipient list. She was the last to receive it. That wasn't an accident. It was punctuation. I, the man who once waited up for her to get home safely, had scheduled her public irrelevance before she even landed and made sure she felt it down to the second. She sat back in her chair, the same one she once bragged about furnishing with Italian leather. It squeaked slightly under her, the only sound in a space that had already stopped recognizing her voice. She ripped open the bottom drawer of her home filing cabinet like it owed her money. Legal folders spilled out across the floor. Past tax returns, renovation permits, and the glossy welcome packet from that overpriced Aspen retreat she dragged me to last year. None of it mattered now. Somewhere in here, buried beneath years of marital bureaucracy and corporate vanity, was the only thing she was still clinging to: leverage, proof, something she could wave in someone's face and say, "This wasn't legal. He tricked me. Undo it." She flipped through the contracts, yanking paper after paper from their plastic sleeves with shaking hands. And then she found it. Equity transfer agreement, Schedule B addendum, refinancing package last year, the one I'd framed as a routine adjustment before the new fiscal cycle. She barely glanced at it. I handled the finances. She skimmed the summary page, asked a question about her retained voting shares, and I'd smiled calm, reassuring. It just locks everything into place, I'd said. Nothing changes unless something really extreme happens. And she, balancing a mimosa in one hand and a calendar invite in the other, signed. Now she saw it, Clause 6C in smaller print, tucked beneath subclauses about dividend schedules and founder rights. In the event of a verified breach of marital fidelity or fiduciary duty, uncovered by forensic financial audit or a violation of prenuptial agreement loopholes, all voting shares transferred to the spouse shall immediately revert to the founder. This clause is irrevocable, binding, and not subject to discretionary appeal. Her initials, her signature, looping, date, timestamp, notarized. Her hand dropped the page like it burned. She staggered back and sat on the cold tile floor, folders still open beside her. The silence in the house suddenly felt surgical, as if it had been waiting for her to discover just how deeply cornered she really was. This wasn't a trap hastily built in rage. This was architecture, months, years in the making. She'd mocked my caution, laughed at my disaster prep folders and my obsession with structure, called me paranoid when I used encrypted storage for board documents, rolled her eyes when I double authenticated our estate planning login. And while she was busy treating me like a paperweight with a wedding ring, I had been building fail-safes, triggers, legal fuses, not to protect myself from random chaos, to protect myself from her. She looked back at the contract, heart pounding now, not with fear, but humiliation. I'd known, maybe not her exact betrayal, not the who or the when, but I'd anticipated it, not emotionally, legally, strategically, and she'd handed me the keys with a pen and a glass of orange juice in her other hand. She whispered the words before she could stop them. He planned this. The realization hit like a second betrayal, but this time, she was the architect of her own collapse. Every step she'd taken, every smug glance across the hotel bed at Preston, every condescending remark about how her husband would never have the spine to leave had been permitted because I didn't need to chase her down with accusations. I just needed her to keep going. Now, the emails made sense. The weaponized divorce papers I was about to serve in public, the photo releases, the timing of the leadership transition, the trustee appointment, all of it already filed. And this contract, it wasn't a backup plan. It was the detonator, signed, sealed, delivered by her. She didn't sleep. Couldn't. She sat on the living room floor all night, surrounded by paper, contracts, screenshots, emails, memos, all her weapons now useless. They stared back at her like tombstones. At 6:43 a.m., she stood up, showered, dressed, not in soft neutrals or elegant blouses, but a black power dress, sharp angles like armor, because if they wanted a show, she'd give them one. She drove fast, parked illegally, walked straight past reception like a storm in heels. The same two guards stood by the elevator. They didn't move, didn't nod, she didn't slow down. This time they didn't stop her. The elevator dinged and opened, empty, waiting. Her reflection in the mirrored doors didn't look like a woman who'd lost everything. It looked like a woman about to claw it back. She stepped out on the executive floor to find the hallway quiet. Too quiet. No assistants milling around, no phones ringing. The door to the boardroom was ajar. Inside, her father sat stiffly near the far end, Preston beside him, hands in his lap, leg bouncing uncontrollably. Neither looked at her. She stepped in, and there at the head of the table, my seat, I sat. Alive, present, real, hands folded, eyes calm, posture relaxed, as if this were any ordinary Thursday. She opened her mouth. 1,000 things surged up, accusations, legal threats, something about breach of marital contract, maybe even a last-ditch appeal to the version of me she thought still loved her. But before she could speak, I said, "Welcome back." No venom, no mockery, just acknowledgement. "You may watch today's meeting," I added, gesturing to the back row where auxiliary chairs had been placed. Then calm, final, "You don't have a seat at the table." Her lungs locked up. There it was. Not shouted, not dramatic, just truth. She turned to her father. Nothing. Preston, visibly sweating now, jaw clenched, eyes locked on a smudge in the wood grain. She stepped forward, the door shut behind her with a soft hiss of hydraulics. The room didn't flinch. No one looked up because to them she wasn't a participant anymore. She was a spectator. She moved slowly to the side of the room, took a seat that wasn't offered. The trustee entered from a side door, nodded to me, and began reading from a prepared agenda. Compliance update, legacy, asset migration, vote on board appointments. Each word felt like a nail, not in a coffin, but in a door she would never open again. She looked at me, her husband, the man she once called predictable, weak, the man she thought she could outmaneuver with charm, intimacy, and silence. And I, sitting in my fortress of legality and legacy, didn't even look back. She was breathing, but it felt like drowning because in this room where power once bent to her last name, where she used to flash smiles like weapons and speak with the smugness of assumed permanence, she was just another body in a chair that didn't belong to her. She thought my silence all these months had been passive, weak, a man too hurt to fight back. But now she saw it. It wasn't silence. It was the sound of doors locking, of signatures drying, of ownership transferring. It was the sound of a plan landing on its final square and her left standing at the edge of the board.